Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Crashes and Taxes. I am your host for this podcast, Rebecca Walser. So glad that you are joining us. We are video casting this podcast, so if you want to watch the video cast instead of just listen, do that at any time. We love to see those of you that are watching by video. I want to talk today about the proposal to break up the gatekeepers, and I'm specifically talking about big tech. Big tech. Big tech has delivered, I have this bifurcated feeling about big tech as an advisor and as an investor and as somebody who is a patriotic American. I'm a lawyer, probably a libertarian at heart, and I want my freedom. My favorite movie is Braveheart. Freedom. That's all the guy ever said, right? William Wallace. I once worked for a boss in London, and Braveheart's my favorite movie. Kind of dumbly said in London one time, oh, my favorite movie's Braveheart. And it's very obviously not pro English for the king. And literally my boss gave me like the dirtiest look about Braveheart because it makes the British king look horrible and Scotland look like the victims, which that probably is the case, but the British did not like to hear that. They were not happy with me. I was like, oh, that was so dumb. That was a little international faux pas that I committed. But I'm serious about this big tech situation. So EU has had a proposal, and you know that the EU changed their privacy laws, and they made the tech giants really jump through a lot of hoops, probably almost going on 2 years ago now. But really, the EU has been talking about these being monopolistic. And so now we have this new kind of unusual alliance between the Netherlands and France coming together and saying, yes, we do need to break up the top 20 tech companies. We need to break them up and separate them into smaller companies. Fair and tough rules is what France and the Netherlands, joining now EU together, of course, they're a part of that, to actually, they're independently as individual countries really trying to overhaul rules of the Digital Services Act, which just, basically legislates on content transparency, disinformation. Brussels, of course, is the head of the EU, and they've been in charge of this legislation for quite a bit of time. Now, I feel as an investor and as an advisor sort of a mixed sense of correctness on this, because if you look at what happened really during the shutdown in March, April, May, it's the tech stocks that really kept our portfolios making returns this year. NASDAQ doing incredible, the tech stocks doing extremely well in a period where the rest of our economy was shut down. And we moved to cloud computing. So you saw new tech companies like Zoom really zoom up the list of holdings to really have future opportunity. Red Hat, cloud computing, all of these Azure, AWS, just on and on and on. Cloud computing, telecommuting, video conferencing, Microsoft Teams, all of these things really had a huge impact on making our techs still perform very well during the shutdown. And so I'm grateful that the techs gave us a really good, a place to hold investments. But at the same time, there's another problem now. They've become so big and so massive, and they are monopolies. So now you have Attorney General William Barr, talking about potentially bringing an antitrust lawsuit against Google. And you also have now the EU and France and the Netherlands talking about really, truly coming up with ways to break up the top 20. And then, in the US companies specifically that we're talking about. And then you have this situation that happened recently where we now know, it's been being said for a while, that conservative viewpoints have been pushed aside, depressed, shadow banned. You might have heard of that term, so that you're trying to reach content to your audience and it's not getting to your audience. It's not actually getting disseminated. That's the shadow banning, kind of secret algorithmic hiding of conservative content that they've been accused of perpetuating, whether that is the case or it's not the case, has been some suspect to, they've been obfuscating and they've been going to Congress, and I'm talking about the tech CEOs, Jack, Zuck, when they have gone before Congress, they have denied every time, Google, of course, that there's any kind of anti-conservative bias, and that they are not, Breitbart News, for example, Google this year, most of Breitbart News which is a conservative website publication, most of their traffic came from Google searches, and in the 2016 election, they had such a statistical amount of people coming from Google search engine traffic, and this year now they are like literally on the second page of the search engine at the bottom. So you've got really now hard data saying that this is actually happening, but let's forget all the data and let's just look at what happened recently, which is one media publication, specifically the New York Post, had a story about the son of Vice President Joe Biden that was completely banned. Like, I literally saw a video of a congressional staffer trying to link to the New York Post story. So this is an actual video of them on their page. You could see their page trying to link to the video, and Twitter comes up and says that link is not allowed. It violates our policy against hacking or dissemination of hacked materials. And then they did it again, thinking maybe it's a mistake, and they put in the link to the New York Post. And again, it came up with Twitter saying, no, we're not going to allow this link. So Twitter completely not only prevented any user tweeting out the New York Post story, but Twitter also deleted or basically froze, canceled accounts for people that actually attempted to do so. Specifically, the press secretary, Kelly McEnany's Twitter account was suspended. And another group's Twitter account, a government group's account, was suspended. So you did see Jack Dorsey coming out the night that this all happened, saying that it was a mistake, but then subsequent to that announcement that it was a mistake, it's still being banned. So here's the problem. When you have a group of anybody, whether it's a private tech business or it's a government elected, a tech business we use because we subscribe to their use, any group that gets to put themselves in place of you as a decision maker as to what kind of content you should or should not be consuming, it's a problem. It's censorship. And the last time I checked, by the time you reach adulthood, you can decide for yourself what information you think is garbage and conspiracy theory and bunk, and what information you think is legitimate and should be looked at and read and investigated. Whether it's on the Republican side or the Democratic side is not the point, although it does seem to be focused on people that are more on the conservative spectrum. The point is, who are these people to decide that people in America do not get to consume the content the New York Post put out? Who are they to decide this? This is bananas. It's so interesting because we're so against communism. Specifically, let's look at the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. There was a conference it was a tech conference, believe it or not. And I remember watching some internal, video from this conference, and it was so interesting because the bubble they had these people in, where you could have a tech conference and you could get to Google, but you couldn't search for anything that would deliver any information that the CCP did not want you to have. So we are a free people in America. We believe that bad speech is solved with more speech. Bad speech isn't solved by having a Facebook code of conduct or a Twitter code of conduct or a whatever code of conduct that says you are going to be banned from the platform if you use a curse word. What needs to happen is you allow people within reason. There's exceptions. You can't threaten people. There's certain exceptions, of course, as always there is, just like declaring fire in a theater is exception to the free speech that we're all entitled to. But the way to handle someone who's cursing or who's promulgating just a bunch of conspiracies is letting the people that read it decide that this person is a nutcase, a quack, if you will. And when you don't do that, and when you set up a fact check system for your fact checkers, and believe me, facts are not supposed to be subjective. By definition, the nature of a fact is that it is indisputable, it is established, it is not subjective. What's going on with these fact checkers is these fact checkers are checking things very subjectively, extremely subjectively. And so you could have a legitimate fact and it could be considered mostly not true. I've seen it, mostly untrue. What does that mean? Mostly untrue. It's like it's mostly true. What does that mean? That means that there's a part that's false. And it means that something that's true is not true if you're going to say it's mostly untrue or mostly true. This is either true or false. That's how we determine a fact. But fact checkers are subjective because they're looking at things in context and putting them in their context, and then they're grading them from that perspective. We don't know what context or contextual perspective someone is saying a fact is true or not true. The point I'm trying to make here is this is censorship. And while it's not censorship by our federal, our state, and local government, which is important because that would be worse, it is censorship that has come about through I would say nefarious means. And what I mean by that is these platforms specifically came about and used something in the law called Section 230, which allows them to claim that they are a non-publisher. They are not picking and choosing what people are writing. They're a non-publisher, and therefore they are not legally responsible for the content that people publish. So they open themselves up as these public platforms of free speech as a non-publisher, not liable for any of the content that was getting published. And along the way, they picked up millions and millions and millions of Americans as users and followers of their system. So how many people have their photo timeline on Facebook for the last 15 years, or maybe not 15 years, but the last 10 years, you've had, this thing on Facebook, and what does it look like? And you've got all these pictures, and you've built your life, you've got your friends, you've got contacts, you've got everything on this Facebook, between instant messenger and the Facebook platform and Instagram and all these things. You've built this entire world of yourself and your life and your friends and your family. And you did that because they let you post what you wanted when you wanted, and they let you tweet what you wanted when you wanted. And now they've got all of these millions of users and subscribers to their data platform. And then they do the old switcheroo. And now we get to decide what we do or don't want to promulgate, what we don't want to publish, what we don't want you to publish or you to say or you to link to. And I'm sorry, but unless it's a video of, and someone being executed, or some kind of, against the law pornographic sort of information, unless it's something that is just so outrageous and illegal, we are a free country and we are adults and we get to make the decisions of the content we consume or don't consume. So if you want to put a warning label on something that says this is, but then where does the warning label go? Who gets to decide what the warning label is? Who gets to decide that this is gray and not black or white? Who makes those decisions? Fact checkers that are not biased? And I think we've known and we've seen now that tech has got a very heavy leftist bias. And that means that half the country is not happy. And if they had a rightist conservative bias, the other half of the country wouldn't be happy. Either way, if you take a perspective as a corporate entity, you're going to make one half of this country feel like you are censoring them. And that's what's happening. And it is a really it's a really juxtaposition for me, because I think tech has a long runway still. I think we're in the infancy stages of what tech's going to do for the rest of eternity and all time. And I think long term, it's a great investment. But these tech giants have really put themselves up against the scrutiny of the world because of the power that they are yielding. And it is not governmental power. It is voluntary power that people have built their lives on these platforms for many years. And it's very hard when you've done that to just say, oh, I'm turning it off and I'm walking away. What would be a much more ideal situation is clarity around the publication rules and the exception of Section 230. And can we get these companies to go back from pure censorship, which is now so blatant, and can we get them to just agree that unless it's sexually explicit content, cursing, some kind of violence threat, something that rises to the level of criminal activity, that it should not be banned from any platform that holds itself out as a public free speech platform that is not subject to being a publisher. So this is hot off the press that France and the Netherlands are teaming up with the EU. This is all on the heels of what has just happened in America, this clear case of censorship. Now, it's really hard for a politician who's on the right or the left to say, yeah, I'm tweeting out all this information and yet all my followers aren't getting it. They're not seeing it. That's the shadow banning. It's really hard to establish an algorithm and show that someone's being shadow banned, although there have been many groups that have attempted to do that. But what is not hard to do is to say, here is another mainstream media publication, the New York Post, producing a story about the child of a presidential candidate that is not able to be published or disseminated or retweeted or linked to either on Facebook or Twitter. This is a very clear example of censorship, and whether it's at the government level, which would be worse, or the private level, because you can walk away at the private level. And that's usually the solution. The free market will come up with a platform that conservatives aren't banned on. And in fact, they have a Parler now, which is, similar to a Twitter. I think it's similar to a Twitter. Yeah, a Parler. So the free market can come up with alternatives, but the thing that's just a little bit not right is that they portray themselves as a free speech platform and that you can say whatever, and then after getting years of people onto their platforms, they're now basically turning on this censorship, and it's a big problem. And I wouldn't care whether it was on the right or the left. No, it doesn't matter what they're censoring. What matters is that they're censoring, and it's wrong. We are a free republic, and I want to know what your idea is, and you have a right to say your idea, and I could completely disagree with you, but I so agree with your right to say it. If that's not the America that we're in, what are we living in? Where are we living? America is better with diversity of opinion and thought. And the thought police wanting everyone to think or see or go one particular way, that never works out well. That is the beginning of communism, when you can't even think outside of what your mindset is. And I do not support that at all. I am completely against that. The solution for bad speech is more speech. It's not no speech. That is the bottom line. So for those of you that have a big tech position, and most portfolios do still, because techs have been where it's at in 2020, let's be clear, this is a beginning of the change that you're going to see brought about by these big techs. EU is definitely going after them, and I think Americans, there's just, once you can say, look, you can't even link to another media's published material, publicly available story can't even be linked to. Americans are saying, wow, this has gotten really bad really fast, and somebody needs to do something about it. And I want America to be free. So from a investment portfolio perspective, I would say keep your eye out on developments for Europe, and keep your eye out for congressional developments in the Senate and Department of Justice developments, because I understand that some antitrust legislation or some antitrust lawsuits potentially are coming for Google very soon. So, as much as I love the techs, because I do believe in them as an investment, and I do believe that they are overall a great thing that has been invented and created for our lives. As much as I love them, this is their fault. Don't build a platform where you get millions and millions, hundreds of millions of Americans onto it, and then decide that half of them don't get to have a viewpoint. Because our country is pretty evenly divided. As much as you might think that it's not, it pretty much is. It's very, very evenly divided between the urban and the rural and suburban areas. And so you just don't build a platform and then decide that half the people that have certain viewpoints don't deserve to express them anymore. that's a problem. Until next week, my friends, crashes and taxes, have a great one.